One of the great things about the NBA playoffs is one round can be completely different than the one before it. That's one of the themes of the first game of round two. We're going to break down all four games on today's All NBA show. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the All NBA show powered by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/AllCity. I'm your host, Adam Mares, not joined today by my esteemed colleague, Tim Legler. Late scratch today on the show. He will be back on Friday. You know, ESPN has him moving around the country right now, last-second changes and everything else, so he wasn't able to make today's show. But I didn't want to just pass on it. I figured I'd at least give you guys a breakdown because these game ones were so interesting that I figured I would just record an episode here for the diehards of the show that wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of all of these. Because to be honest, the first games in a lot of these series were really interesting, especially Wolves Spurs and Cavs Pistons. So I wanted to spend some time on those two, and then I'll obviously touch on the other two series at the very end of the show. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you hit the like button. Let's get to it. The theme of round two, game one, in my opinion, across all of these matchups, is how different a series can be and how different a team can look when you just change venues and you change opponents. You mix things up. So the best example of this, in my opinion, has to be the Detroit Pistons, who a week ago, we were looking at them thinking they're a 1 seed, successful season, and down 3-1 to the Orlando Magic, about to be eliminated, and their entire season would be defined by that elimination, especially if it happens in 5 games. There's an injury to Franz Wagner. Detroit rallies back, wins 3 in a row. And now you sit from where we are right now with a dominant game one win over the Cavs, or pretty dominant, I should say. Cavs did a good job of getting back into it. It's going to be interesting. But they were able to control the game at the very least. And you look at the Boston Celtics got eliminated, who were favorites to come out of the East. And suddenly, I'm not saying it's going to be a cakewalk because I think it's going to be tough. But at this very moment, after watching game one, you have to look at Detroit and say they have as good a chance as anyone to come out of the East. And 1 week ago, they were about to be a 5-game loss of gentleman's sweep in the first round to an 8 seed. This is how much things can change, and it can affect the way that you evaluate rosters and evaluate what success is. You look at the Boston Celtics, favorites to come out of the East, up in their series 3-1, all of a sudden it turns, and you're left to ask, how much of that is a formula that doesn't work versus they hit a team that got hot at the right moment and was better than advertised? In this case, the Sixers, better than advertised when fully healthy, and it all clicked into place. You can make a case for Denver and Minnesota. Minnesota makes them look terrible, but maybe Minnesota's better than given credit for, and maybe that's just a tough matchup. So this is the joy of the playoffs, is that a team can look one way in one matchup and completely different in the next one. To me, that's the story, because as we talked about on the show, Detroit had a physical advantage all year over most teams. They just like to play bully ball. They can lock you up defensively with size, athleticism, but in particular strength. And they matched up with an Orlando Magic team that could absorb all of those things. And so their biggest advantage was wasted. Not the case against the Cleveland Cavaliers, at least not in game one. And especially Jalen Duren, who is having a horrendous playoffs for much of the first round, goes into this game and grabs 7 offensive rebounds. I think he had 6 in their last matchup of the regular season. So this is like a thing that is, this is an advantage that he can press. And it kind of changes the geometry of the equation for the Pistons, because they don't have a great ability to space you out with shooting. So there's lots of different ways that you can space the floor. Quick ball handlers can space the floor because you have to be like prepared and help, because they might get into the paint early. So you have to be there. Obviously, with 3-point shooting, off-ball movement can create gravity if you're clever with how you use off-ball. I mean, Golden State, they obviously compounded Steph Curry's 3-point shooting with all of the off-ball movement and cutting and everything else, and it accentuates the gravity. It adds to it. If you look at Detroit, one of the most underrated types of gravity is just the big physical big man inside who dives to the rim and then just starts the rebounding process 3 seconds before the shot goes up. And if you're strong like Jalen Duren, and you're going up against very tall, but maybe guys who you can leverage strength against, in particular Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, all of a sudden it can have its own type of gravity that opens up the paint because you're constantly wrestling with him. He grabbed 7 offensive rebounds in this game, and I don't think he had a second chance point, by the way. So none of these resulted in his individual points, but they did result in extra possessions for Detroit. And more importantly, it's one of those things where it's like, Wembanyama blocks. He had a bunch of blocks, but he affected even more. Jalen Duren had 7 offensive rebounds, but he affected every possession because you were worried about the rebound. And so it opened up extra spacing in there. And he manhandled, one of the big stories with Mobley, and I like Mobley a lot, but he can break his size with physicality. He's a guy that is really tall and big, but if you get physical with him, you can kind of almost knock him down a little bit. And I think that happened in this game. 5 offensive rebound advantage. Detroit got 5 more offensive rebounds in this game than Cleveland did. They forced 8 more turnovers. This was a big story for the Cavs, and one of the reasons I think you can probably clean things up. They had 20 turnovers in this game. That's probably not going to be something. That's something they can control. A lot of these turnovers were the type that I think you can go to the tape and prepare for. They gave up 15 points off of turnovers. They only lose by 10. And then they lost the free throw attempt battle. That one might be sustainable, though, just because a lot of those fouls are about the physical advantage that they have over Cleveland. So all those things. And then on top of that, Jared Allen picked up 2 quick fouls in this game, and that also changed the complexion of it. And that's something that Jared Allen can be a little bit better at, but that is your fear when you're going up against a team that can play this like bully ball style is, are you going to be able to stay out of foul trouble? And if not, how is that going to affect your team's rotations, their defense, and everything else? So that's the big story for me, is that physical advantage really impacted all levels of this game. And then that gets, before we get to Cade Cunningham, who has his own physical advantage I'll talk about in a second. Detroit's offense, though, really is predicated on how much they can get into the paint. Because as I said, they don't have this great spacing naturally, that you have to create spacing by collapsing the paint and getting where you want. And that's why this series is so different from the one before. Orlando had the ability to make getting into the paint its own task. And then it's a task out getting the ball outside of the paint, once you collapse it. But even the first step of getting to the paint, if you can shut that down, you can completely change the complexion of the game. Detroit in this one, and I think in large part because of Cade Cunningham, they were able to get into the paint at will. And here's where, first of all, you go to pick and rolls, and you're going to try to trap, or you're going to try to like sandwich the defender while you're making your rotations. But Cade is so big, especially when you're talking about the guys he's able to target in Cleveland. He has this height advantage to see over everything, and also the advantage to keep the defender in jail or on his hip. And so he's able to do this for the majority of the game. And what that does is you have these rim protectors. Cleveland all year builds this identity on, yes, our guards might have to chase around screens and might not be the best at, contesting these different things. But we have 2 elite rim protectors back there that are protecting him. But when you have Jalen Duren on your team and he's able to not necessarily roll and lob, but he's just able to say, if you, Evan Mobley or Jared Allen, step out to curtail the pick and roll and keep it out of the paint, then I'm already working on my rebounding or just my drop off and dunk. I'm already there. So they're constantly have this tension between how much do we all year we step up and contain that versus every time we step up, he's grabbing an offensive rebound, and it mitigates that advantage. As a result, Cade is able to get there, get into the paint and kind of slow things down, operate, and figure out what he wants to do with the play. And the offense looks good. You also have the ISO option. You don't even need the screen because sometimes you can just run guard-to-guard action and get Donovan Mitchell or James Harden switched out onto Cade, and that's obviously a huge advantage for a guy like Cade Cunningham. First of all, his first step is going to be able to get around both of those guys anyway, naturally. But even without that, he has just the bully advantage, especially on Donovan Mitchell, where he can just get if he can get half a step or even a quarter step on him to where you're on his hip or on his shoulder, then he could just use his body to kind of push you and navigate himself to where he wants to go. And that sucks in the help as well. He can actually even be much better, I think, than he was. I think Cade, I'm kind of a Cade, truther in that even when he has bad games or bad shooting nights, like 6 of 19 in this one, I still watch him and I'm like, yeah, but he does everything right. Like the shots make or miss or whatever, but he does everything right and he's able to get wherever he wants and manipulate the game exactly how he wants. I felt like that's what this game was, and he didn't shoot well, and Detroit still wins. There's some things I think that the Cavs can do, and we'll talk about those in a second, but I just look at that and say, Cade Cunningham was 6 of 19. I think if you replayed that exact game, he probably goes 10 of 19 at the very least, maybe 11 of 19. And that's why I think the Cavs are in a great spot in this one based on what I saw in the very first game. One of the big questions, though, is that Asar Thompson plays 33 minutes. Most of the other stars, Cade goes 42, Jalen Duren 35, Tobias Harris 39. So he plays slightly less than all of those guys, more than Duncan Robinson. And Dennis Jenkins, who had, I thought, a rough series in the last one, in large part because he's a small guy, and that series was all about like who was going to give up the physical advantage the most. Well, all of a sudden now you get into a series where it's going to be mitigated by Cleveland's backcourt, and you're able to put him in there for more spacing and another like quick threat to get into the paint and collapse the defense. And this changed things. So Detroit could generate much more quality offense when they took Asar Thompson out of the game late. One of the stories is that they dominated or controlled the game, and Cleveland came back, and you wonder how are they going to respond to it. Well, they responded with an adjustment, which I think is the best way to win. Sometimes you just stay the status quo and barely hang on, and you go home thinking like, oh no, we have to make an adjustment, or what do we do? Their adjustment was kind of obvious in that, okay, Asar Thompson helps us in a lot of ways, but if we have to close this game by scoring and spacing, we have another guy who's playable in this one, and Dennis Jenkins did that. And now they have to decide between how hard to fight with Duren. Can they try to battle him one-on-one? And now you have an extra shooter and a little bit more spacing out there. It just looked very repeatable. What Detroit did looked very repeatable. So Detroit takes game one. I thought they looked great doing it. If you're Cleveland, the biggest thing you look at are these turnovers. I mean, a lot of them, you get, 7 turnovers from James Harden. I'll still say uncharacteristic. I know people want to pile on and say we've seen this before from him. I think that I think he's going to be able to limit himself to like 3 turnovers, based on what I saw here. Just control the ball a little bit better. Don't try to force some of these passes. And the Cleveland offense, I think, can get a little bit more rhythm, in this next round. The physicality is going to be a big deal. I think Evan Mobley is, like I said, he's a guy I really like. 14, 9, and 5, 2 block shots. But he is a guy that I look at in this one and say he becomes an X factor in this because he has to do the thing that I think he's least equipped to do, or I should say least comfortable doing. He is a guy that guards in space and rotates and does all these different things. He's going to have to go wrestle Jalen Duren in this one. It's like this becomes, you're going to just have to play physical and wrestle with him and keep him off the glass. It's not just him. It's going to be a team effort. Jared Allen's going to have to do the same. But I look at Evan Mobley and say, you don't want to be a superstar, max contract type player, cornerstone piece if there's something that is an Achilles heel that doesn't require a chain sequence. Like you might have an Achilles heel, but it takes the right collection of players and all these things have to happen. But if your Achilles heel is just get big and physical with him, well, then a guy like Jalen Duren is always going to be in your way. So Evan Mobley, to me, this is a big series for him, and I want to see how he responds. I like him a lot, so I think he's going to be able to respond, but we'll see how it goes. All right, let's take a break. On the other side, though, we have all of the other games to go to, including my favorite series of the second round, which is the Wolves and the Spurs, and what an incredible one. And we're going to go to Thunder Lakers after that, Knicks Sixers as well, which that one had fewer notes, but let's talk about why it had fewer notes on the other side. But first, right now, new FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right, turn $5 into $150 in bonus bets just for getting started. And when every possession matters in the playoffs, FanDuel makes it easy to get closer to the action. From player props on your favorite stars to all the tools you need to back them up, FanDuel puts player research at your fingertips so you can check stats, trends, and matchups all in one place and make your picks with confidence. It's everything you need all in one app. So don't miss your shot. Head to FanDuel.com/AllCity to get started. FanDuel, play your game.
Must be 21 or older and present in select states. For Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in D.C. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.
What kind of dreams did you have when you were a kid? What did you want to be when you grew up? How about now? Are you thinking about starting your own business? Shopify is the e-commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Shopify even powers the All City merch store. Shopify has you covered with website creation, product descriptions, email and social media marketing, and more. They also have AI tools designed to help you maximize sales. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Just sign up for their $1 per month trial, a crazy deal. $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/allcity. That's shopify.com/allcity. All right, back here, segment 2. No Tim Legler today, but he will be back on Friday with me as we talk about the game 2s in this series, which will probably be even more interesting than game 1s. But we're on game 1 today, and we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. This one, Wolves Spurs, though. So good that it had to get billing for our FanDuel game breakdown because I wanted to talk about it. The Wolves both controlled this game and are lucky to have survived it. The meltdown at the end of the game is almost worth its own sort of like segment or discussion, and the entire narrative of this game would have flipped on a dime. The Spurs did not deserve to win this game, and yet they were in position to steal it. And if that shot from Champagne, if you didn't catch it, the Wolves are up like 9 points in the final minute and a half, just completely collapsed down the stretch. And it results at the very end. In fact, they were up 6 with like, I can't remember, like just enough time for you to foul and what have you. But they go, they cut it to 2 points, so the Spurs do. And then they get a pretty open Julian Champagnie 3-point look at the buzzer, like a pretty good look. Pump fake, defender flies by, one dribble to the left on the wing. Nobody that can contest it. You know nobody can contest it. Set and get it off just in time. And he just rimmed out. So the Wolves in some ways are lucky to be surviving in this game. And I think now have a leg up on the series. You steal home court advantage because you win game 1 on the road. So that's like the best way to set the table for you to win a series as an underdog. And yet, I still feel like they dominated the game, even though they almost got bit in the end. We'll first go to Victor Wembanyama, which is interesting because he had 12 blocks in this game, which is an NBA record. And, you know, some of them, the controversy, and it's a legit controversy, Chris Finch played the note perfectly well. 4 or 5 of these ones were goaltends, and I thought obvious goaltends, and it was weird watching. If you miss one goaltend, sometimes goaltend is like block charge, you know, like sometimes it's hard to tell at the exact moment. But some of these were like off the backboard, bounced back a good like 4 or 5 inches before Wemby blocked it again. And if you miss one of those, it's weird. But to miss 3 or 4 of them, it's like, man, what is going on? Nonetheless, 12 blocks is insane, and there's like it affects. You can even see it in Minnesota how much it affects their thinking process, their processing power. I thought Minnesota, though, did a great job of adjusting and figuring out where the seams are, and you could even argue that maybe they're just designed to figure out where these seams are. I'm going to get to that in a second. But the first impact Wemby has is, what is Gobert's offensive role in this system? I thought in this game it was to try to do what he always does, which is pick and roll, dive to the rim. But I don't think that is valuable at all against Wembanyama. It's a rare example of a guy who's just longer than Gobert, and that lob's not going to be there. You're not going to get the like downhill, throw it over the top, over Wemby right into Gobert for the dunk. Even dropping it off, Wemby, like Gobert, they're very similar in a lot of ways, but like Gobert, they're really good at the short recovery, meaning to show on a pick and roll at like the foul line or below, and then the lob goes or the drop-off pass goes, to be able to recover to then contest at the rim. That, even though it's only like 10 feet of space you have to move, a lot of bigs are not good at that because the play happens so quick. You pump fake, drop it off, dunk. It's like 1 second where you have to kind of show on one, contest, and then recover and block. It's really hard to do, but Wemby and Gobert are number 1 and number 2 in the NBA at this specific thing, and Wemby's probably number 1 just by virtue of his size. And that kind of erased Gobert's offensive value in this one. And then on top of that, Gobert, you know, the Spurs, I think, are going to have a hard time scoring in the series. They obviously had a hard time scoring in round 1. Minnesota's defense just goes to a completely different level in the playoffs, which is a funny talking point that Chris Finch has had, where he's, and I actually talked to people going into the Denver series on the Minnesota side, you know, with their organization. And one of the things they told me was, they've all told us that they know exactly what they're doing and they're going to lock in on defense, and I take them at their word. It's been frustrating watching a lackluster defensive performance from this team for most of the year, but they tell us that they still know like what they have in the tank and they will be there in the playoffs. And this is why it's hard to evaluate them. One of the things you would look at Minnesota throughout the regular season is they have to be a juggernaut on defense for you to buy into them, because offensively, even though they have the type of bucket getting that you need in a playoffs, they're not going to be a team that's just going to win you by scoring 130 every single night, 125, like run you out the gym. Their points are still going to be tough to come by, even with their great individual shot makers. But you buy it if they're an elite defense, and this year they just weren't. But I think they knew that they were an elite defense, and that they've just been to the conference finals a handful of times. Regular season, just get through it healthy. Don't do anything stupid and conserve your energy. And that's exactly what's happened in this one. So their offense still might not be elite, but their defense, they might be the best defensive team in the playoffs right now. And the playoffs are all about defense this season. It's all about the teams that can defend. It is that way most years, but especially true of this year. But one of the things then becomes, all right, if everybody is defensive minded, San Antonio and Minnesota are both defensive minded, then the margin points become so much more important. And one of those margins is going to be transition. So if Gobert doesn't have a lob threat for you, he is going to be a little vulnerable in transition. And so now you have to make sure that you're maximizing those minutes. I think Gobert has to become what Jalen Duren is, which is just go to the dunker spot. Like when you're rolling, don't expect to roll for the lob or the short roll. Just roll to the dunker and immediately establish yourself as a rebounder. Because one thing you can do, and I'm talking about Wemby making that show and recover, just take away the recover part. Get him to extend even further out. Put up some bad shots, which Minnesota's comfortable doing. Their guys are comfortable taking contested, tough shots. And then just own the glass and get it in his head. He needs to do that. Wemby was also 0 of 8 from 3. It's hard to imagine him being worse, but I do walk away. He had 11 points. I do walk away thinking that I don't think he's going to have a great offensive series. I think this will be his worst offensive game, but I don't know that we should be expecting like a bunch of 40-point games from him, or he's really going to get loose and do a whole bunch of different things, and his three will be knocked down. This group is going to make his life very difficult, and they're going to disrupt San Antonio a lot. And I think this is, when we talk about guys going to a playoffs, like you go against Portland and he just looks like a world beater, defensively dominant. He looks like the player he was in the regular season, scaled up. You go into this one and you realize, like, yeah, there's ups and downs to playoffs. Sometimes you just get a series where it's all about winning ugly and your numbers are going to suck, but you just get through it the ugly way. And I think this is Wemby's first real test of that. 11 points is obviously bad. 0 of 8 from 3 is bad, but this might be one where he just needs to get to 25 ugly points, and that'll be enough, and do everything else on defense. But the biggest thing for me is that the Wolves are really good at mid-range shot creation and really good with size, obviously. You can put size all over the court. I like Detroit versus Orlando. San Antonio has size, but not necessarily like the strength, that Minnesota has. So you've got a lot of, like, Castle is really tall. You've got a lot of guys that are tall and have some length to them. Even Fox and Harper, like they're not small. They don't have small guys, and they're athletic in their own way. But Minnesota has like giants. McDaniels is too tall for the guys that are guarding him. Julius Randle is too tall and too big for the guys that are guarding him. So they have Naz Reid, same thing. They have a lot of guys that are going to be able to at least get contested shots that they're comfortable taking. And it turns out that the spot on the court that is going to be most valuable in this series might just be the mid-range, because Wemby is going to wall off the paint and do a good job of taking away the rim. Their perimeter defenders are going to be good at forcing you into tough threes if they're off the dribble. And if you can't get all the way to the paint and collapse, you're not going to get the kick-out threes that you want. So what you're stuck with then is, can we get some like mid-range shot creation and shot making? And Anthony Edwards, this is like his music. He's like, okay, so you want me to hit some like followays on the baseline, put my hip into guys, step back and shit. That's what he wants to do. And it's almost easier when you know that's what you have to do. Sometimes that shot feels like settling. In this series, it might be the target more often than not, especially when you talk about we have the size to get second chance opportunities and play some bully ball. So I look at this and think, if the goal is to win, as this game went 104 to 102, Minnesota looks at that and says, sweet, that means we can take all of the shots we want to, that we can. 104, 102, mid-range is on the table, go crazy, and those guys are really good at it. I think the other big concern for San Antonio is that, and this is one thing I think they can change, is that late in the game, they put Wemby like out on the perimeter. They would switch him out onto Terrence Shannon Jr., and sometimes he'd just match up with him in transition. Might have even been the assignment there for a little bit. Terrence Shannon Jr., by the way, one of the breakout stars of this playoffs. I've always been a fan of his game because his athleticism is insane, like truly insane. If you haven't watched this guy, his speed with the ball in his hands and then his ability to transfer that speed vertically. I've talked about this with Cooper Flagg in the past, that one of the underrated things about athleticism, to be able to go full speed at like a full speed sprint and then transfer that speed into vertical jumping. It's hard to do because it's like you're putting everything that's going horizontal straight down and then straight up. And that transfer can be tough. There's a lot of players that actually struggle with this very thing. And then there's a handful of players that are really good at it. Terrence Shannon Jr. is an example of one that is just insane at it. And Chris Finch has talked about this year. You know, he tough talked him in that first round before he got into the rotation. What does he need to do to play more? Well, he needs to help himself and, you know, really focusing in on the flaws. And I think this happens in coaching a lot, where coaches will really see your flaws and it'll completely make them blind to what your strengths are. And I think the best coaches are able to look at players and not as a value thing of like, well, you shouldn't be bad at defense. You shouldn't be bad at help and this or that. You should be good at this. And sometimes say, okay, he struggles with that. So how do I play him and what circumstances can I put him in? How do I get him better at these things? But here's what he's great at. And how do I accentuate the thing he's great at? What Terrence Shannon Jr. is great at is having the ball in his hands and getting downhill because he is such an insane athlete with the ball in his hands. And he has a knack for scoring. I mean, he's a true, like, natural scorer. When you watch him do things with the ball in his hands, you can tell it's improvisation that doesn't require anything other than he just feels it and he's so good at it. Well, if you try to cross-match with Wemby, one, it's going to take him away from the perimeter. And two, for all of Wemby's mobility as a defender, and for a guy 7'4", he's as mobile as you could possibly imagine. But it doesn't mean he's mobile enough to guard an elite on-ball first-step athlete. And that's the thing is, okay, now you're drawing him away, so he's going to be far from the basket for help side. And two, I don't think he can stay in front of Terrence Shannon Jr. He's going to have to, like, really sag off of him. And now Terrence Shannon Jr., that's what I would do, because even though he can make threes, I think you're probably more willing to just live and die with Wemby trying to contest from too far away, but at least he has his hand up against a guy that doesn't know of how much he should be shooting or how far to push things. At least live with that, because if you play up on him, he's going to go around you every single time. They have really found something with Terrence Shannon Jr. And look, I think they would rather have Dante DiVincenzo playing and just have their fully healthy roster. But it is one thing that I think you could walk away from this with Minnesota. If they make a deep playoff run, if they win this round, it's officially a deep playoff run. You go into next year feeling like Terrence Shannon Jr. has been unlocked. Now, this year is a title window for them, so there's no consolation about worrying about next year. But I just look at this and I go, Terrence Shannon Jr., to me, will be in the conversation. When we preview the Timberwolves next year, we'll talk about Terrence Shannon Jr. as a positive impact player. Like, hey, this is another weapon that they have. He has been a breakout star. He looks incredible. And then just the clutch play from Minnesota in this one, other than the last minute and a half, the rest of the clutch play I thought was really, really impressive. The last thing I'll say about this is there's a narrative when team runs through injuries that it's like, you know, things just piled up against them and there was nothing they could do. Or you know, sometimes they ran into a challenge they just couldn't overcome. And I never like that, even though it's true. Like, you can lose too many players to where it really does become untenable. But what also happens sometimes is what Minnesota is doing, which is that by all rights, they should have just been out of the playoffs by now. By all rights, they probably should have lost game one. But they have just become, I think them and the New York Knicks are the two teams that have become, through the playoffs, the truest version of themselves. All these other teams are still getting good. Like, Detroit might be in the process of that. We might be seeing this from Detroit a little bit. But we can, I think, for sure say this of Minnesota. And I think we can for sure say this of the New York Knicks of, there was the best version, the worst version of them, and then what they were for most of the year. And in the Knicks' case, what they were even early on in the first round. But at some point along that, things clicked into where they kind of fell into the groove of, this is who we are. And we're not falling out of that now. We're no longer the team that is our best and worst self. We're just our best self. I think Minnesota is that. They play like the Timberwolves should play. The Knicks are there. All the other teams, in my opinion, with Detroit, like I said, I'm waiting to see. But the other teams I think are still like, who are they? The caveat is that the Oklahoma City Thunder, I think, have been themselves for 2 straight years, full regular season and playoffs. So this is just kind of who they are. They're not a team that has variance. Let's move on, though, to the next one here, which is the Thunder and the Lakers. The irony, the other theme of this year of the playoffs is that it has never been easier to score in the NBA in the regular season. Like in this regular season, you're just routinely seeing scores that are 140, 150, 130, and just everybody's scoring 30 point per game. Everybody's doing it. It's never been easier, and you see offensive ratings through the roof. But the irony is that in this playoffs, it might be the most difficult defensively of anything we've seen. I was trying to, like, as I was doing this, I actually wanted to not just say a number, like a random number. I wanted to actually think when the last time defense seemed to be this impactful. And I think I would say 2010. I think 2011 onward, I would say the league started to shift a little bit more offensively, even though you had great defenses in the early 2010s, like Miami and what have you. I still think the defensive physicality, versatility, size, athleticism, those things, I still think in the last 15, 16 years, it's pales compared to what we're seeing right now. If you go back to like the Boston Celtics, that was a team that had a lot of size with Kevin Garnett and, the ability to play defense, interior defense, perimeter defense. And then obviously if you go to like San Antonio and Detroit in the mid 2000s, I think you're seeing what we're seeing now where the game became difficult to score on. But it's wild to swing from what an offensive season this was in the NBA to what a defensive playoffs it has been so far through one round and one game. The other thing about this series is that, look, I don't think this one's going to be competitive. I actually think if you're the Lakers, you almost pat yourself on the back, did a good job. They played about 28 minutes of really, really, really good basketball, the Lakers did. But the Thunder just wear you down, in part because they have so many guys. They don't have to rely on heavy minutes from any one individual player. And they can just, it's like waves of guys that they can throw at you. And just at some point you're going to crack. But it's more that if you can focus for 28 minutes and be within 4 points, and then lapse for 90 seconds, you might be down 15 points because the Thunder are just a metronome. And the moment you mess up, they are so good at forcing turnovers and so good at converting those turnovers into points. The Lakers had 7 turnovers late in the third and then a couple to start the fourth, and the game was over. What felt like a moral victory at the very least for the Lakers, hey, we can hang with this team, we're right there, turned into we're just like everybody else, we're going to lose by 20 points, and it happened like that. And the thing that makes the Thunder so great by design is that you have to have ball movement to beat them. And I'm not saying you just have to constantly pop the ball. Like, LeBron's size gives him a huge advantage here because he can slow things down, get to his spots, collapse the defense. But you're not going to just win with like one pass, kick out, now the guy's going to make a shot. You're going to have to like accentuate whatever little advantages a special player can make in the half court. Then you're going to have to compound that into 3-4 swing passes, and now you get the open shot. The problem is the Thunder are so good at scrambling to recover, but they're also so good at scrambling to create passing turnovers. And I think I would be curious, maybe this is a task for All City Stats and Research, aka producer Atticus. I would bet that they get more turnovers per game off of passes than any other team in the NBA. And it's like they have just a bunch of great cornerbacks and free safeties. Their gap help it relies on their speed, but their speed doesn't just close out. They also get hands in passing lanes. And so if you need ball movement and they're just elite at getting interceptions, it's such a perfect combo, and that's exactly what happens. So you screw up for 90 seconds, you protect the ball so well against an impossible defense for so long, and then 2 minutes of bad passes, and the game is over. The other question I have is, how much will LeBron James wear down? This has really been such an impressive playoffs for LeBron. So, to this point, he had 27 points and only 2 turnovers in this one, 6 assists, 4 rebounds. I know those numbers aren't crazy, but 12 of 17 shooting. And if you watch the game, I just thought he controlled his portion of this the best you could possibly expect. And I'm not just saying for his age. I'm saying like Cade Cunningham in this same situation. I think you would be hoping for a game like that. You're not hoping for a 45-point masterpiece. You're hoping that, hey, limit your turnovers and try to be efficient and get the ball where it's supposed to go. LeBron did that. But I do wonder if fatigue is going to quickly become a factor in this one. I mean, for one, it's going to be a factor in these playoffs. And the Thunder getting done in 4 and having a week off coming into this one, This game felt like rust to me. They actually looked rusty. They said after the game that they felt rusty. But you know what they didn't look was tired. And LeBron James is having a heroic effort in these playoffs, but it is fair to wonder of all players, even the young ones, like how hard is it going to be to get through 4 rounds? I think you need at least one short series in your run to winning the finals. You need one that at least gets done quickly. The Lakers aren't going to have that. If they're going to win, they're all going to be ugly and grimy. And you have to wonder about 41-year-old LeBron having that kind of workload. How is he going to wear down in all of these games? I would bet yes. But it's one of the biggest factors that when I just look at OKC, I think they are vulnerable. But there are wars everywhere right now in the playoffs, except for with OKC. And if they're able to take care of this one in short order and the real challenges don't show up on their doorstep till the conference finals, in both conferences, I think they have an enormous leg up if they're able to do that. Can Austin Reaves be a positive against the Thunder? I'm going to say no. He had 8 points on 3 of 16 shooting, 4 turnovers. He's not going to be this bad. It's one of the worst playoff games, like individually, that a player can have. But this was the reason coming into the series, and we actually talked about this with Jason Timpf, I believe, on Monday shows. We were previewing this one, is that I just don't know if he can overcome this. They have too many guys that can guard him. They can wear him down, and this is what they do. They make it really hard for guards that are crafty. Jamal Murray is in the same camp. If you have some speed or some physical strength or something like that, you can put a pressure on them because there's limits to everything a person can do. If you're relying on craft against that defense, they're equally as crafty as you are on the defensive end. And as a result, you're just never going to be able to create advantages. He went 3 of 16 in large part because he had to take 16 shots off of his own creation. Some of these are kickouts that he's going to make. That's why I say this will probably be his worst game, but I don't know if he's going to have a good game. But some of this is you go 3 of 16 in part because you're not creating advantages off of this. It's not leading to, I broke my guy down and now it's a drop off or a kick out. It's I'm trying to break my guy down. I didn't break him down. As a result, nobody else is open, and now I've got to get a shot up against a tough defender. I don't think he can be a positive in this series. I mean, I'll own it if he comes back and has a monster rest of the way, but I think OKC's defense shuts players like him down, and we're going to see that here. And then lastly, they had the right strategy, I think, against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Shai had a horrible game. If we really want to put like a bow on this series, the Thunder won by 20. LeBron had a good game, and Shai was about as bad as you're going to expect. 7 turnovers, and he just looked out of rhythm. It wasn't even just the turnovers. He just had weird decision-making. Now they're going to try to trap him to get the ball out of his hands. OKC, they have the right kind of shooting. They have guys that can make it. When you compromise yourself to get the ball out of Shai's hands, they have guys that are they've been doing this for so long. They know the rhythm to that kind of shot. And the ball, if they're going to trap, we're going to be open. Either it's one pass or it's a swing pass. Just be ready to shoot, knock it down. And they have guys that can do that. The thing that was interesting about this one was that Shai seemed almost reluctant to allow that to happen because he should. And sometimes it sucks when you're the star player. He had 18 points. It's like, this might be one where you say, we are fine with me not scoring if you're going to completely compromise your defense and just get out of it. I thought he tried to press the envelope a little bit too much in this one. He talked about it was a rhythm thing, and I'll take him at his word for that. I'm guessing that this was the game you had to win because Shai had his bad game. And then they went 13 of 30 on the three. What I'm talking about is if you're going to trap, you're going to be vulnerable to threes from guys that you're hoping like, we're going to give Lou Dort 5 threes. Well, he's going to hit 2 of 5 if it's obvious where those shots are coming from. Alex Caruso, 1 of 4. He's going to be okay there. So the Thunder win this one, I think, pretty easily. I'm not really sure what the Lakers can do on this one. LeBron's been great, and I do think that he could win them a game in this series if it's just like fully tilted in his favor, just everything go through him. But I would bet that comes sooner rather than later because at a certain point, I think he's going to wear down too much. Lastly, let's go to the Knicks-Sixers game. And this one I don't have tons of notes on. Actually, I do have tons of notes on it, but it's not that compelling. One, I think the Sixers looked fatigued. A 3-1 comeback leading into this matchup, and they just looked – this almost felt like a punt game from them just in terms of like the energy that they brought. And the Knicks, it was the exact opposite. I mean, they were locked into their defensive assignments, pressuring the ball, getting into defenders, and then their like digs and rotations and everything else was just done at full speed. So this looked like their advantage. Mikal Bridges did excellent work on Tyrese Maxey. I mean, this series really comes down to, in my opinion, not to get to the big point right away, but this series probably comes down to how effective Tyrese Maxey can be. And I think very effective, by the way. This is not like I felt like Austin Reaves where I'm thinking he's drawing dead. This is one where Maxey absolutely can win this battle, but he absolutely did not win it in the first game. 13 points, 3 of 9 shooting, only 9 shots, by the way. This game did end kind of early, so there's a little bit of just not a huge minute total. But Bridges did an excellent job of flustering him, and I'm very curious for game 2. Of all the games and all the details that are like most interesting, this might be the single most interesting one is what does Maxey do in game 2 against Mikal Bridges and the Knicks defense? Because if he's locked up or just looks uncomfortable again, then this series might actually be a short one. If he plays the way I think he's going to play and is able to like find different pressure points and be an impact player, then I think this is going to be a phenomenal series that's going to go a lot further. I talked about the Wolves. The Knicks are just completely different than their regular season. They had a run, by the way, and maybe we talk about new signals for the playoffs in this new era of the NBA when the regular season matters less than ever. And I truly believe this. It might be that you don't necessarily look at the record or how a team ended. Are they coming into the playoffs with momentum? You have to look, did they have any portion this year where they looked like a juggernaut, like an extended portion? And the Knicks had this, if you recall, like in the middle of the year, almost exactly the middle, they went through an incredible hot streak. They also went through an incredible cold streak, but they went through a stretch where you were like, man, that team could be a juggernaut. And I wonder if it's just too unrealistic and impossible for a team to look that way for an entire regular season, that teams aren't even trying. But they do want to see it at some point. And even if that comes in January as opposed to March, we might just have to start looking at this signal and just saying, hey, we just saw the Knicks reach the top floor. And whatever happens rest of the year, we know that's in there. And so in the playoffs, it might come out. Right now, the Knicks are looking like the best version of themselves. The biggest story, though, is that Philly can't make Jalen Brunson uncomfortable. Or did not make him uncomfortable in this first game. Jalen Brunson goes for 35 points on 12 of 18 shooting. He only played 31 minutes, so it's not even like a 35. He had to really stretch this out. He played regular season minutes in this one, actually lower than that, and goes 12 of 18. And the reason is, when we talk about, this is the opposite of what we were saying with Detroit, where Detroit had to run basically with ankle weights on in their first round matchup, and then they're freed in this next one. And it's like, oh, everything's easier. For Philly, the drop, like Joel Embiid's rim protection, especially in pick and roll, was the deciding factor in that last series because Boston wasn't comfortable shooting that pull-up three-pointer on pick and rolls. In this one, though, Jalen Brunson is like designed in a lab to break drop coverage against a rim protector that just wants to stay home. He's designed for it. He loves his little floater. He loves like when he is able to put the player on his hip. We talked about this with Cade, when he's able to play the defender in his hip and then just like keep him there while he's playing the big man now. And either he gets to his step back or he gets to his floater or he kind of makes crafty fakes and pivots around and gets all the way to the rim. He loves doing this. And so him going 12 of 18 to me is not a, hey, this just, this is a small, he had a hot game or what have you. It's he got to do the exact thing he wants to do. You guys, your defense is designed for him to do that. So they're going to have to, so Sixers now are going to have to make some kind of a defensive adjustment that takes them away from the one thing defensively that won them round one. And the question becomes, what is your defensive versatility? Are you able to win multiple different ways on the defensive side? And we'll find out what the answer is to that. Are they going to have to switch more? Are they going to have to bring Embiid up, which is something they did most of the year, by the way, is played him up in their pick and roll coverage, but they weren't doing it in the playoffs. And does that have ripple effects? Playing up is way more exhausting than playing in drop. So is that going to hurt Embiid on the other side? TBD. That's going to be the story in this series. Cat also creates a lot of problems. Oh, the last thing I was going to say is, if we remember, I think it was the Utah Jazz against James Harden, like back in 2017 or something, where they went to this crazy defense where they basically said, we're not going to try to recover. Like usually you chase over a screen as a defender and you're behind for a second, and then eventually you rotate to the side or back to in front of him. They were like, we're actually going to guard him from the back because his step back is the thing we're afraid of. He's too good at his step back, even in the mid-range. Part of me wonders if that's what they're going to have to do with Jalen Brunson, is just say, you know what, shoot all of the forward-leaning floaters you can, but we're not going to give you straight vertical pull-up jumpers. We're not going to give you step-back jumpers. And you might get 35 points again, But if they're only floaters, that's probably the least efficient of the mid-range shots he can take. You might have to go to extremes like that because sometimes it just throws a guy out of rhythm. Karl-Anthony Towns creates a lot of problems for Embiid as well because he can obviously shoot, but he can pass. And Embiid was a monster in that first round series. But the matchups he was going against were guys that just were not. I mean, Vucevic is not going to be talented enough. He's got the size, but not talented enough. And then the other guys, Keita, that they're going to throw at you, Garza, those guys don't physically match up with him. So he had this giant advantage, and they can't punish him. It's not like those are guys that are going to be posting him up or grabbing rebounds over him or shooting threes around him. So you kind of Embiid had the best of all worlds in that first matchup. Now you have two guys in Cat and Mitchell that are both going to make him work in different directions. And it's meaningful that both of those guys won their minutes, meaning they didn't just win the one matchup, Cat versus Embiid, but they also won the other matchup, which means that you now, that shows that a center has to think two different game plans, basically based on who's on the court. But Cat can shoot, and he can slash and score in the basket, finish with floaters or jump hooks or whatever, even over Embiid. But the real difference is that he can also pass. He's not just a guy that's out there to do one thing. He's dynamic. And so now Embiid's job of walling off Brunson and trying to contest that and grab rebounds, but also you have to step out because Cat might shoot it. No, by the way, he might not shoot it. He might drive around you and he might pass. All of a sudden, Embiid has to guard every spot on the floor and every possession, and it's going to be a real challenge for him. So first round, super favorable matchup. This round, defensively, I think is a very difficult matchup, and we'll see how he does. Paul George was good, he's just been good in this playoffs. A kind of underrated storyline that Paul George still looks like Paul George, is still able to do a lot of Paul George things. But the big story is that Maxey was just terrible in this game, and you got to see what he's going to bring in game 2. It was almost a punt game because if Maxey's not going to be good, then this series is not going to be very compelling. So that's it. That's round 1. Ran through all of the little details I have in my notebook, game 1 of round 2. Those are all the details I added here. Like I said, Legs was a late scratch today, but he should be back with us on Friday. But I hope you still nonetheless enjoy the games as much as I do. I have all these notes I wanted to share with Legs and have him talk about it, so I figured why not just do a show? If we were planning on doing it, might as well do it and see if the people enjoy it anyway. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you're subscribed. We have some cool stuff coming up on the channel, including these great lottery pick breakdowns of NBA draft players that are coming from my guy Will Gottlieb starting next week. We got the lottery Sunday, so we're gonna have some extra content. We're gonna have content 7 days a week on this channel here, basically from now until the draft. Should be great. Everybody, thanks for watching. Hit the like button on the way out.
We all silly like the mayor.